So I think the best thing about boning knives is how much money they can save you, so you can then take that money and invest in other knives. Seriously, what's awesome about understanding a boning knife and how to put it to use is that you can then get whole pork loins or whole chicken legs or an untrimmed brisket, and you can trim it or break it down on your own and save a ton of money. I mean, seriously, just right now alone in Pennsylvania in 2024, chicken thighs that are boneless and skinless are more than double the amount of regular chicken thighs. So in this video, I'm going to show you the different styles of boning knives. We're gonna break down a whole pork loin, some chicken legs, and a whole brisket. And then I'm gonna show you how certain boning knives, depending on their shape and their style, also double as utility knives. Meanwhile, I've got some utility knives here that are excellent as boning knives. What's up, y'all? I'm Chef Brandon with Cutlery and More, and I've been collecting knives for well over a decade, many of which are boning / utility knives, and I'm excited to dive into the nuance of these different knives so you can start saving some money by cutting up your own whole proteins or removing silver skin and fat, filleting your own fish, or just using them as utility knives, whatever you like to do. The whole point is these are incredibly versatile knives and you're gonna love using them. Now, before I dive deep, I wanna show you these two knives. These were my grandfather's when he was a butcher back in the late 1940s into the 1950s. And not only are they an amazing piece of family history to have, but as a knife collector on top of that, these just have a lot of meaning to me. Now, the reason I'm showing them to you is because yes, these are boning knives and they can do a lot of the things that these can do, but these are more designed for butchering. As you can see, the handles are really grippy and robust. Although this is a similar size to the rest, this is much larger again, which is much better for whole animal butchery. And another thing to note is that these have some pretty sturdy spines on them, so they're designed better for things that you need to give a little twist or where you need leverage on the blade. So if you are into butchering, then this is definitely the style for you. But when it comes to breaking down larger cuts of meat, or say a whole chicken or filleting a fish, the boning knives that I'm going to show you today are much better suited for those types of things. All right, let's get started with the three types of boning knives that I have here, and then we'll talk about the utility knives. The first type would be flexible boning knives. As you can see, these got quite a bit of flexibility to them. Not only are they great for breaking down various types of meat and poultry, but these also serve as fillet knives. Now, if you notice the handle, you can see at the very tip of the handle, the base of the blade into the bolster area, how they stick out. Well, this is basically for a little bit of extra safety. So if your hand is wet, where this sticks out here at the heel will help give you a little bit more support. Next up, we have the Japanese boning knife, which is called the Honeski, which also looks like Honsuki, however you like to say it. I'm good with it. Now, what's really different about these knives is that they have a much taller blade at the base where the heel sticks out further. And what that does is it provides you with knuckle clearance. You can see if you want to use this as a prep knife, you have plenty of space there that you could get into a tap chop, even a little bit of a rock chop or a push chop without your knuckles cramming into the cutting board. So of all of these knives, these are probably one of the most multi-purpose or dual purpose in the sense of being able to use them as a prep knife. There's also a huge difference between these two, and that would be the thickness of the spine on this Moritaka compared to the Shun. And in a little bit, I'm going to show you how this more robust boning knife is better for certain tasks, and we'll put it to work on our chicken legs. And last but not least of the traditional boning knives, we have the curved boning knife. Now, above all the knives that I have here that I've used on various types of proteins, when it comes to working with larger cuts of meat that are much flatter, the curved boning knife is by far superior. So let's see the Enso in action with the brisket that I smoked last weekend. So there's three things I want you to focus on as you're seeing the footage of me breaking down this brisket that was absolutely delicious, by the way. I have you know, it was about a 12-hour smoke on the Traeger. Anyway, the first thing is notice how easily this gets under the silver skin and removes the fat when it comes to the flatter areas of the brisket. The curvature of the knife is what makes this work so much easier than a straight boning knife. The next thing is look how this gets into some of these more harder to reach places, like where these muscles meet and there's this big chunk of hard fat. It's really easy to maneuver. I can get in there, get a good amount of fat out without damaging the meat, and then I save that fat to render. So this is just great for getting into some of these more awkward positions. And finally, you can see that when it comes to moving the knife at different angles or slicing on a curve, the curvature of the knife combined with the thinness of the blade, it just moves like butter, whether it's going through the soft fat, the hard fat, or the meat itself. This knife is an absolute joy to work with when it comes to trimming brisket or any large flatter cuts of meat. And then to top it off, you could use this for a rounder cut as well, like a pork loin or a tenderloin. Oh, that brisket was fantastic. All right. Now, I want to show you some of these utility knives. Basically, they're all near identical. It's just differences in the blade finish, the type of steel, and the handles. But as you can see, all of these knives are about 6 inches in length, which is pretty much the common length of most utility knives. The Honeski, I think, is 4.5. The rest are 6 here. And as you saw with my grandfather's, they go up to 8 or 9 inches. But in the sense of a traditional boning knife that you would use at home for smaller cuts of meat, breaking down chicken, things like that, this is generally the size between 4.5 to 6 inches long. Now, these utility knives, what's awesome about them is some have a little bit of flex, as you can see, not a ton, but enough that if you wanted to fillet fish with them, they'd be totally fine. And the blade is a little bit taller than, say, these more flexible utility knives over here. And I have these in the middle because they're kind of the hybrid, because nowadays the Honeski, or the Japanese boning knife, is generally marketed as a utility knife. And this is where you kind of get the best of both worlds, because you can use to break down and trim meat, but you can also, like I said, use for everyday prep because of that ability to use them in that tap, chop, or push chop technique. We already saw the brisket. I know we're talking about boning knives, which are generally more for meat, but I'm actually going to demonstrate the utility aspect of these knives first with my apple, tomato, and cucumber. That way I'm not dirtying my cutting board before my raw veggies, which I'm gonna eat raw. So we're gonna go in order in the most sanitary way, which is gonna be our fruit and veggies first, then we're gonna do the pork loin, and then I'm going to do the chicken, because this is what's going to be cooked at the highest doneness temperature. So we'll save that for last so it doesn't contaminate anything over here. Let's get started with an apple with your standard flexible boning knife. As you can see, it is totally fine for this type of prep. The curved Enso, great for slicing in your prep work. Generally with the curvature of the blade, that's the action you're going to see more than anything, would be slicing, maybe a little bit of push chop if you're using the back of the knife. The Honeski, let's say you want to get a little tap chop going. You've got plenty of knuckle clearance, so it is great for any type of tap chop. If you want to julienne an onion, fantastic. Now the Shun utility knife doesn't have knuckle clearance, so going into a tap or push chop over here is not going to be the best, but with the utility knife you can come to the back of the cutting board and now you can get into your push chop like so. Any of these knives will slice a tomato, but a lot of people like to use a paring knife to remove the base of the stem. You could use this curved Enso, just choke up on the blade, and you could pop that right out. Or you could use this flexible Victorinox in that same type of motion. Done. And any one of these will slice a tomato with ease. Now let's say you're making some fresh salsa, but you don't want all the juicy seeds in there. Well, you can take this nice, thin, flexible boning knife and you can fillet out your seeds. And now you can cut these into any size you like for your salsa. Again, you're in more of a slicing type of motion with that style of knife, but if you grab the Haneski, now you can get into more of a push chop type of position or a rock chop. So the same knife that you're using to break down some chicken legs, you can now use for making some fresh pico. All right, let's slice up some cucumber. This is the Shun, the curved boning knife. And again, similar to filleting out the seeds of the tomato, you can use this Shun to just remove the seeds of your cucumber, which is great because it doesn't make your salad soggy, or if you're doing a cucumber salad, that's fantastic. Now we can turn these over and we will cut them into roughly 1/4 inch pieces. You can see I can get a nice push chop with this Shun because the base of the blade is at a completely different position than the curvature of the tip. Or you can use the Haneski and go to town with the tap chop. All right, let's shift gears and trim up this pork loin. The pork loin that I have here is kind of like where the New York strip meets the ribeye, and that really has a lot to do with this muscle here and over here versus the really lean piece right in the center. Now, personally, I like this side with more of the muscle and the fattier bite, but my wife likes this side. So how I like to go about trimming these is basically for his and hers. Let's use this Victorinox to get started here. The first thing that I'm going to do is trim this muscle off because this is going to be the leaner side for my wife. And the same thing with this one over here. And all of my trimmings become dog treats, just so you know. And now we're going to cut this. You can see this knife just glides through. It's amazing. And now we're going to trim off the fat. And with this relatively flexible knife, it is just really easy to get in and under the silver skin and the fat. What I like to do is get a little piece to grip going this way because I'm right-handed, and then come back and I'm pulling on that ever so slightly just to create some tension. Let's turn it this way, get a different view. Switch things up a little bit. Let's go to the curved boning knife. You can see that this gets under there nice and easily. The silver skin is a little bit harder to get under. And there you go. Now, depending on what you're doing with the trimmings, depends on how deep in the meat you want to go. If you're not saving any of these scraps for Fido, then you want to try your best to make sure you're not cutting into the meat at all. But my dogs love this as a treat. You can see how that curvature just coming down on those flatter areas, it just gets under there. It's just designed for this. Okay, now we're just going to grab a utility knife here and show you that just slicing these into steaks is very easy. So these will be for my wife over the next couple of days on the grill. And then this is going to be mine, which I'm going to leave this pretty much as is. The only thing I'm going to do, we'll grab this curved Enso here, is just trim a little bit so that some of these looser pieces don't char too much. And as you can see, it's very similar to a ribeye. Cut these up into steaks. We'll go back to the Victorinox here. Easy breezy. And there we have it. Pork loin with boning knives and utility knives. Good to go. Okay, let's break down some whole chicken legs. I'm going to get started with this Wusthof Icon utility knife. If you want to leave the skin on these, that's totally fine, but you still want to get rid of excess. So you can see with a knife like this, which is a utility blade, it is awesome for just getting rid of that in seconds. Here's another Wusthof. Gets rid of that skin effortlessly. What else we got here? Let's try out the Honeski, the Moritaka. Any of these will do the trick. I already did this one so you can see what I'm talking about, but there's a joint here at the tip of the thigh which is covered by this extra bone. So what we're gonna do is come in at a bit of an angle to remove this extra bone right here, and you can see where the joint is. You just get right underneath of it, and then you can pop through and get rid of the rest of the bones. Beautiful. I like to save this for broth or stock or to render out the fat. Next up here, there's this membrane. You can literally almost see the line that separates the leg from the thigh, and there is a joint right there. Oh, got it. Beautiful. So there is our leg. And now for the thigh here, first thing I like to do is just kind of trim off a little bit of this fat. Put this off to the side. And now for removing the thigh bone, what I like to do is kind of pinch on both sides, and we're just going to slice on each side of the bone until that opens up. Then you're going to get underneath the bone, come up, and come down. There goes the bone. And then from here, you can leave the skin on if you like, but you still want to trim this up a bit so that these little pieces hanging off do not burn when you are grilling them. And then feel around. Sometimes there's little bits of cartilage, which in this case, I don't feel any. There is your boneless chicken thigh, and to make it skinless, you just pull the skin off. Now that was with the Wusthof flexible boning knife. You can see that was an absolute breeze to work with. Let's go to the Honeski for the next one. Not a lot of flexibility with this, but you can see it's a very sharp knife. It's great for getting rid of that skin. Now we're going to get underneath, and this one you can see I can use that wider spine and use this a little bit more forcefully than I would with some of the other knives. Go and find that joint. There you go. Good to go. This one, we will remove the skin. I can use that sturdier blade to have that leverage instead of getting my other hand all dirty. Trim this up. That's great. Let's make some space here. And now in the sense of getting rid of this bone, the more narrow tip you can still use to get into each side of the bone. You can get underneath of it easily. And there you go. There is a boneless, skinless chicken thigh. I can feel there's a little bit of cartilage right here. Just gonna pop that off. You can see I'm being much more aggressive with this blade because of how durable and sturdy it is. Now some of you might be like, oh, it looks like you're wasting a little bit of meat there. I promise you, I don't waste any meat. all of this gets rendered, turned into stock, something like that. I always try and use every bit that I can, which is why when I'm breaking down chicken or something like this, I don't worry about going super slow and exactly precise. And honestly, neither should you. Just use what you can. That's it. So let's go in here, get rid of the leg this time. And let's say you want to keep that bone on for whatever reason, a little handle for chowing down later. It's that easy. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you with this Honeski, which is great with this thicker blade, is lollipopping the drumstick here. So what you do is you come and spin this as you're cutting. And again, more durable blade here is great. And then what you can do is you can pop off the knuckle here. You can see, again, I'm really putting a lot of pressure on this blade. And now you can use the spine and you can push up all the meat and connective tissue there. And you can fry it like this, or you can grill it. And then you've got a really nice, clean handlebar for when you're ready to dive in. Okay, last one with this curved Enso. I would say of all the boning knives here, the curved is what I'm generally going to for a lot of my meat prep. It just, something about it. Go boneless, skinless. Notice how I had that on the angle there as I'm pulling, so I'm not digging into the meat as much. Nice fine tip for removing that little bit of cartilage and bone that likes to stick in there. Easily goes through this fat. Perfect. And then let's say you want to do like a stir fry, you could easily then slice this up into thin strips. Hit them with the seasoning of your choice, saute them. There you have it. All right, folks, I've got a lot to clean up here, but more importantly, I've got a lot to cook, which I'm excited about. You just saw a bunch of boning knives in action, from the flexible to the curved to the Japanese Honeski. You also saw utility knives that are acting as boning knives, and vice versa, boning knives acting as utility knives. So if you're looking for an incredibly versatile knife that you can use for protein, filleting fish, cutting up some veggies for a sandwich or a salad, a boning knife is definitely an awesome option, or a utility knife. Thanks so much for joining. I'm Chef Brandon with Cutlery and More. This has been a lot of fun for me. I love breaking down this type of meat and, more importantly, saving a bunch of money so I can buy myself some more knives.